Your eyes and your vision are under attack. Damaging blue light from the sun, your phone, your computer, your tablet, even light bulbs and car headlights is constantly bombarding you. The good news is our eyes actually already have a line of defense to counter the effects of blue light. This defense is made up of 3 pigments called carotenoids. MacuHealth with Micromicelle, the only supplement with the exclusive patent on all 3 macular carotenoids and Micromicelle technology.
Do your patients know what presbyopia is?
There are people who are afraid of the press.
Have you talked to your patients about multifocal contact lenses?
I've heard the bifocal, but not multifocal.
Exactly, not multifocal.
Do you need help with your multifocal strategy? Learn more at the conclusion of this episode. With more screen usage and indoor time, myopia, also known as nearsightedness, is increasing and getting worse in children. Now, certified eye doctors can prescribe MiSight One Day, the first and only FDA-approved soft contact lens to slow myopia progression in age-appropriate children. Visit CooperVision.com to find a Brilliant Futures certified eye doctor near you. Good morning, I'm Dr. Kerry Gelb, and welcome to Wellness 1280 on Open Your Eyes Radio. Please listen as I discuss the newest information in the world of health, nutrition, and sports every Saturday morning, 6 a.m. Central Time on AM 1280 The Patriot. Also, please share your thoughts by emailing me at drkerrygelb@gmail.com. That's drkerrygelb@gmail.com, and visit my new website, wellness1280.com, where we have all guest links, Wellness 1280 info, and previous shows. Wellness is taking over the Patriot Airway for the next hour. Sit back and enjoy part 2 of my interview with concussion expert, Dr. Evan Mladenoff. So in part 1, we talked about sports and how concussions affect about 1% of kids that play sports, and the problems with rushing kids back too soon from concussions. So today we want to talk a little bit about what we could do to help these people. I just want to remind you that Dr. Mladenoff, his book, Doc, When Can My Kid Play? Something I've read, highlighted. I've read the whole book, and I have a 14-year-old kid that plays baseball, and baseball is a sport where people do get concussions and that we have to worry about it, although the biggest sports are football and soccer. So Dr. Mladenoff, welcome back to Open Your Eyes Radio and Podcast with Dr. Kerry Gelb.
Thanks, Dr. Kerry. It's awesome to be here. Thank you for having me.
So last time we were talking about all different ways people get concussions. We talked about boxing. We talked about Muhammad Ali. We talked about some of the football players who actually committed suicide and really became crazy from repeated concussions. Now the NFL and sports is trying to make things more safe. But is the helmet enough to prevent people from getting concussions? Or do they also get concussions from the head being twisted and turned, similar to like a car accident where you get sort of a whiplash?
That is an awesome question. So helmet technology has dramatically changed over the past decade at least, if not longer. So we have to ask the question, what is the purpose of a helmet? And the purpose of a helmet, in my humble opinion, is to prevent fracture of the skull. It's not going to produce the big lie nobody wants to talk about. It's not going to stop the sloshing around of your brain, that jello object inside your head. In fact, to your point, the helmet might accelerate that because now you've got extra weight on the head that can catapult the jello inside to move even faster and farther. So that reminds me of a story. We had this player quite a few years ago, and he had chronic neck pain that I just couldn't seem to get under control. And I said, this was before the Chiefs hired me. I said, you know what? Can you bring your helmet in and let me look at your helmet? He says, Yeah, Doc, why? I said, well, there's something I can fix you. You put on your helmet and it's like stuff comes undone. Well, at that time, he was a defensive back and he had this huge cage on with two little slits for his eyes, basically. He looked like, Cro-Magnon man with all his stuff. The bottom line is his helmet weighed 7 pounds.
Hmm.
So he was running around with a 7 pound weight on his head that was causing his head and his neck to have to work harder. And that's before he even hit anybody. So all we did was we said, okay, listen, I want you to go to the training staff and see, can you get another helmet that weighs less? So he goes and does that. He calls me and he says, yeah, we got two options. There's one that's 5 pounds and one that's 4 pounds. I said, well, just pick one. Either one's going to be better than what you're wearing now. Well, he settled on the one that was 5 pounds. It fit better. He liked the cage and he could do the stuff that he did with his other helmet. And almost instantaneously, the neck pain started going away. Just be from the weight of the helmet. So again, the helmet is no matter what materials they use, and you see all these funny shapes now of some of the helmets in the games, and there's different holes and venting and whatnot, so that the graphite bends and moves in different directions. But the bottom line is, you have this weight on the head. It's still going to make the head catapult and move more, and it's not going to prevent the brain from sloshing around inside your head.
In your book, you made a point that of who is at greater risk of getting a concussion, the one taking the hit or the one giving the hit in football. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, it's curious. You see these, and you can do a YouTube search and see the worst hits in the NFL or worst hits in the NHL. Don't let me forget to tell you about the Eric Lindros story.
Okay.
And you see these horrendous hits, and you see after the hit, the guy giving the hit gets up and goes back to the huddle like nothing happened. So the guy giving the hit is statistically shown to have less of a concussion or less concussions or less problems than the person receiving the concussion. And that's why the NFL came up with the defenseless position of the player to try and protect the players. But I'm reminded one of the first games I was at, I'm in the locker room and the Denver Broncos beat us. It was a Monday night game, and Coach Marty Schottenheimer came in the locker room and he said, gentlemen, I want you to remember one thing. Unless you want to make a donation to the NFL tonight from your post-game comments, it's only holding if the referee says it's holding. So, is there still, we see in the games that happened this weekend, it's still suspect. Well, was that head-to-head contact? It's still somebody's judgment call, but that didn't stop the hit from happening. That's not going to stop the brain from moving. It's only, is the one team going to get a penalty for that, or is the guy going to get thrown out of the game?
So talk to me about the Eric Lindrum story.
Okay, so the beauty of this is a story in hockey. In hockey, you're always told skate with your head up. So you can see what's coming at you. Well, Lindros, from the day he put on skates, he was the biggest kid on the rink. He was a large man, 6'4", 240. That's huge for a hockey player. He didn't have to lift his head because he was like a bowling ball. He could just roll over people, and they couldn't stop him until Scott Stevens. So if you search Scott Stevens, Eric Lindros hit, you'll see Lindros coming across center ice in the blue line, and then Scott Stevens literally stands him up. It's a shoulder-to-shoulder hit. So Lindros's head did not hit anything. Before he hit the ice, he was unconscious. So the moral of that story is, number one, hockey players should skate with their head up. But number two, you don't have to hit your head to get a concussion or lose consciousness.
Wow, that's a very interesting story. So talk to me, because we're in part two for maybe people that didn't listen to part one, about the symptoms that people have with concussion, the main symptoms.
Okay, so again, remember, what they don't tell you in ER, you might not get symptoms for 72 to 96 hours, and there are 4 major areas of symptoms. Now, I got to choose my words carefully here, Doc. The great thrust has been cognitive symptoms. Everybody's worried about cognitive symptoms. Can he think? What's he working like? Can he go back to school? Can he read, right? Well, yes, you can have mental, intellectual, or cognitive symptoms, and it can range from, brain fog, difficulty concentrating, trouble remembering things. You may repeat answers or repeat questions or repeat stories and stuff. But you can also have physical symptoms like headaches, like neck pain. You can have dizziness, you can have nausea, you can have vomiting, right? But then you can also have emotional symptoms. Excuse me. So when I had my head trauma, I was the worst patient because I didn't do what I tell everybody else to do. So I'm working here. Now, the good news is my personal physician was never more than 10 feet away from me, my son. And so when I was working on patients, if I couldn't remember the location of an acupuncture point, something I'd probably done a million times, or I couldn't remember how to do a test, I would go from 0 to like full-blown violent angry emotionally. And so Dr. Chip would come and say, take it easy. We can look it up. Just tell me what you can't remember. And by the way, you're done for the day. And he'd take me to the treatment room, turn off the lights, put some dark glasses on me, put me on an oxygen machine and said, okay, you're done. You probably shouldn't have worked today. But the point of that is that you can have physical symptoms that then trigger emotional symptoms. And so they call it getting hangry, right? You get angry when you get hunger pains. Well, it's that exact same reaction in a concussion. You can have emotional outrages for no reason at all.
And before the break, we were talking about symptoms of concussion. So if you could continue with that for us.
Okay, so one of the biggest symptom areas where people ignore is sleep issues. So you probably heard the ancient moniker, like you had a concussion, don't let them fall asleep. Now you're hearing, okay, rest as much as possible and let him sleep if he's okay. So you can have all kinds of bizarre things like drowsiness. You can't fall asleep, you can't stay asleep. You sleep longer than you used to. You just can't get up all day long. You're sleeping 20 hours a day. So you can have all different bizarre patterns of sleep issues, but everybody ignores those. They don't even pay attention to those. And so that's important because there are a number of studies shown that, if you sleep less than 6 hours a day, you add a year to your recovery. That's like pretty powerful.
So is it true that if you get a concussion, you shouldn't be allowed to sleep? They got to keep the kid up, person up?
Okay, so there's two parts of that. Okay, if there's a life-threatening situation, okay, you should be in ER and they're going to control things, have monitors all over the place. But the average person, where let's say they just got some neck pain, they might have some dizziness, they feel off. It's not going to be a problem to have them fall asleep. The bigger problem is, remember the edge of the cliff thing we talked about last show at the Grand Canyon? The bigger problem, excuse me, you'll see it when you come into our clinic. We have a lot of patients that are sitting there and they got earphones on, they got dark glasses on, they might have a hoodie on, and that's because they don't want any sensory stimulation to their body because it makes their symptoms worse. So if we have time, in the last show, I think we talked about how do you know you're at the edge of the cliff and what should you start to do or not to do. And we talked about that simple test where you take your pulse for about 15 seconds, then just try reading a page of a book and see, okay, does your pulse rate go up? Well, if your pulse rate goes up 15 points, then it's like, okay, that's too much. So wait a day, take your pulse, now read half a page and see if you still get your pulse going up, right? So you got to find that if you don't have anybody guiding your care, that's how you can start guiding your own return to activity care. One of the biggest things I always tell patients, especially young kids, is do not sleep with your cell phone under your pillow because you have radiation coming out of your cell phone. And that radiation can keep re-irritating your brain. So you should have your cell phone at least 10 foot away from your brain when you're sleeping. So back to the pulse test. Okay, it's a little bit harder when you want to start to do some physical activity. So when you start back physical activity, you have to know what your resting heart rate is. And there are 6 stages of return to play or return to physical activity that we counsel patients on. And so the first one is if you're having symptoms, especially head symptoms, you're not doing any physical activity. Like, don't blow them off. If you're having headaches, if you're having eye sensitivity, if you're having dizziness, you're not going to return to any physical activity until you've got at least 24 hours with no symptoms like that. Then the next thing is, okay, we have to slowly challenge your body. So we're not going to do stuff that moves your head. We have to do stuff that increases your heart rate a little bit, because increasing your heart rate is going to increase the blood supply to the brain. And we need to see, okay, can you tolerate that? And so the perfect thing would be first, again, taking your pulse, go for a 10-minute walk, see what nice, casual, relaxed walk, see what happens to your pulse. If your pulse shoots up, okay, that's too much activity. I can't do that. Okay. If you were a world-class and professional athlete, Doc, how much do you increase your workout program? And the dirty secret is these people only change one parameter of their workouts 10%. So they would increase the duration of a workout 10%, or they would increase the intensity 10%, or they would increase the number of repetitions 10%. They would not increase each one of those 10%, right? Because your body does not like change, and that's what athletes do. The more they abuse themselves, the better they get under one condition. You got to recover from yesterday's abuse, right? So they only change very small parameters in their workouts to move their body forward. So you have to keep that in the back of your mind. After a concussion, we're only going to change small parameters that move you back.
So as we continue, so what are things that you want people to do or that they do to be able to treat a concussion? Let's talk about treatment of a concussion and what can be done.
Okay, so remember there's 5 possible areas of injury. So there's neuroinflammation, a metabolic cascade, those are chemical reactions. Then there's the cervical spine, your neck. Then there's your vestibular system. Those are both physical reactions. And then there's a pituitary stalk. Some of that might be hormonal and some of that might be physical. One of the most common things is young ladies within 3 months of having a concussion, over 60% of them had problems with their menstrual cycle within 3 months of having a concussion. Now that's no big deal for a 16-year-old or a 14-year-old, but it's a red flag. Something's wrong, right? And there's been studies again that have shown that don't reach the general practitioner, that a year after a concussion, 20-year-olds have erectile dysfunction and sexual dysfunction a year after. But that's so long after the concussion, they're going to blow it out and say, "Oh, there's something wrong with me." It's not. They wouldn't even think of considering it being for the concussion. And so now the literature is saying if they're continuing to have symptoms a year out, then evaluation of the pituitary gland should be warranted. But the average field doctor is not going to know this stuff because it takes so long for research to get to the doctor's office.
Right. So with the pituitary gland, they're going to have trouble with hormones.
Yes.
It's cortisol. They're going to have stress hormones, testosterone problems.
Yes.
So these are things that can affect when you're having a concussion. Let's talk about, we're trying to get better. They have a concussion. Let's talk about nutrition. What kind of nutrition is recommended? Melatonin, curcumin, what exercise? What are the things that could help with somebody as they're rehabbing, trying to get back from a concussion? So we're 2-3 weeks in, some of the symptoms are gone, but we don't want to have the kid play yet. What are things that we could do?
Okay. Awesome question. So you have to eat something every day. So the brain does better on a keto style diet, meaning, and that's true all the time. So you want to shift towards a keto style diet, higher protein, less carbs. So that's easy to do. You can start to do that. Now there is a caveat to this, and that is I just wrote an article for our 1-hour free seminar that we're going to do, and that is histamine can hijack your brain. So if your son, he's 14, right, playing baseball, so if he's got allergies and he goes and plays baseball, there's a high probability he might have histamine already circulating in his bloodstream before he even plays. Then he hits his head, then that histamine level now becomes totally elevated even more. And so if that's the case, then if you're not under the care of a practitioner and you're using some over-the-counter medication, there are things you need to do, and that is you need to start looking at, okay, what foods are high in histamine? You need to start eliminating those foods from your diet. And of course, this is for that special segment of the population that has allergies and then they get a concussion to boot. So that's like a whole separate issue, right? So keto diet is the first best thing.
Oh, that's very interesting.
And then the histamine
Well,
group is another group.
Let me interrupt you for a minute. What foods are high in histamine?
Okay, this is my favorite because my wife loves these two: avocados and eggplant. Whoa, it's like good thing my wife's out of hearing range. She can't hear me say that. But those are high in. You just do a Google search, foods high in histamine, you'll get a whole bunch of stuff.
Right.
Right. So you just need to now. Some of those people know. Okay, if I eat shellfish, I can go into anaphylactic shock, and I got to have an EpiPen and all that other stuff. Okay, but your concussion finds you where your body's at, and so if you have a history of allergies and a history of high histamine in your body, then you need to make sure you get the histamine dealt with as part of your concussion recovery. So now the other big thing is it's actually two parts, and that's part of the metabolic cascade and neuroinflammation is elevated cortisol. There's a great study that showed that every Alzheimer's patient has elevated cortisol. Now, they don't have Alzheimer's. The Alzheimer's did not give them the elevated cortisol. They have Alzheimer's because they have elevated cortisol. Right? So the elevated cortisol drives you towards that dementia Alzheimer's spectrum. Well, that's one of the biggest things. So we developed a nutritional product to deal with this. I went to about 10 different nutrition companies and said, can you make this stuff for me? And all of them turned me down. So I started my own nutrition company that we deal with. We only have 6 products, and they're all geared towards recovery from brain function.
So what's in those products? Tell us.
Okay, so our number one selling product is something called I Stressed Out. And the main ingredient of that is something called phosphatidylserine, and it literally modulates cortisol down. You can bring someone out of a panic or an anxiety attack by chewing some of that stuff. 4 or 5 tabs every couple hours, and you'll bring them out of an anxiety and panic attack.
How about the difference between phosphocysteine and phosphatidylcholine?
So there is some phosphatidylcholine in there also, and there is some phosphatidylinositol in there. So we've got 3 different phosphatidyl factors to it, even though serine is the most powerful one.
And how about curcumin?
Okay, so we developed a product called I6 Factor. There are 9 nociceptive irritants that cause inflammation. One is cortisol, one is the bad fats, one is lactic acid, which typically gives you burning pain, and then there's 6 other things. So from a business standpoint, we had something to deal with the cortisol, but then we needed something to deal with the inflammatory things. So we call it I6 Factor. There's something in there to deal with the 6 other factors. Curcumin is one of those.
We're speaking with Dr. Evan Mladenoff, the Kansas City Clinic, Mladenoff Clinic in Kansas City. His book, Doc, When Can My Kid Play? We'll be back right after the break.
MacuHealth, your science-born and tested solutions for visual performance, macular degeneration, and dry eye syndrome. New products coming soon. Embrace the science.
We're speaking with Dr. Evan Mladenoff. He has a clinic in Kansas City. There's also one in Arizona that his daughter runs. And his book, Doc, When Can My Kid Play? That's what we're talking about. We're talking about concussions. When can your kid play? So we were talking about nutrition and supplements. We talked a little bit about curcumin, phosphatidylserine. And let me ask you about melatonin. Melatonin has been recommended by some people for concussion. What's your feeling about that?
Okay, so if you watch TV, by the end of the day, you could probably buy 500 different nutrients that they're advertising on TV for this or that or the other thing. So, what's the purpose of taking melatonin? Well, if it's to improve sleep, then, okay, why are you not sleeping? Is it because you have elevated cortisol at bedtime? So if you take melatonin, elevated cortisol is not going to change at all. It won't change it. Melatonin is also a brain neurotransmitter. So if you're deficient in one neurotransmitter in the brain, you could be deficient in other neurotransmitters. So unfortunately, it's not as simple as, this for that. Now, in a pinch, you're in the middle of nowhere, you have nobody to help, you don't have internet service that you can hear a radio show like this, and you can't go buy books because the bookstore won't ship to your place, you're so remote, then I'd say, okay, try some melatonin. So it's the old story. Throw enough spaghetti against the wall, enough's going to stick, but that's not the prudent way to approach dealing with a concussion, because you can get rid of symptoms, but the concussed brain will still be there. And the problem is you might not find out for 10 years down the road.
Omega-3s, you feel the same way, or should everybody that had concussion, they be taking omega-3s?
Okay, so our brain is basically fat, and we need fat in our brain. So omega-3s are really good, but actually the DHA component is a little more important because that deals with memory. Now, some people do that really well. So when I had my concussion, excuse me, Dr. Chip and Dr. Nana put me on a product that has EPA and DHA in it, but higher for the DHA component because of memory, and I could not tolerate that. It started irritating my gut. I started gaining weight. I started getting more angry, and we couldn't figure it out. And we just said, okay, just stop it. And then those symptoms started going away. So some people can tolerate it, some people cannot. Theoretically, yes, everybody needs it, even if you haven't had a concussion.
We're talking about treatment for concussion. How about hyperbaric oxygen? Have you seen anybody that's had it? Has it been helpful?
We had one of the first hyperbaric chambers in Kansas City a long time ago. And so you'll look at the research, and the research says, well, we don't know. And the research always concludes to do more research. That's what research is, repeatedly searching for the same thing over and over again, right? Exactly. But it's like, okay, let me ask you 3 questions, Doc. How long can you live without food?
Not too long.
Well, somebody can fast a year. I wouldn't recommend it, but there's lots of people that do 24-hour fasts and stuff like that. Excuse me.
Oh, I thought you meant me personally.
No, okay. Well, no, I can't go that long without food either. Okay. So how long can a human being, well, let's put that caveat in there. How long can a human being go without water?
I've understood, like you said, a year for when people have fasted.
Right. How long can you go without oxygen?
Right.
Minutes, right? So our brain is in a resting state. You and I are resting now compared to hard physical labor. Our brain's burning up 20% of the oxygen we're breathing in through our mouth. So it is a oxygen-rich environment. Why would you not want to increase the oxygen environment of your body and especially your brain? So I would say a minimum of 75% of the patients we see, we put in the chamber. Now, part of that is if they're claustrophobic, if they're young, it can be a little scary in there for some people. And this is our 4th different chamber. So we have an upright chamber as opposed to the one that is laying down. The horizontal one, that horizontal one, some patients get the feeling like they're in a coffin. And it's like, oh, okay, let's get the upright one. And so it is fabulous. And again, 75% of our patients, as long as they can tolerate going into the chamber, they do really well, and it speeds up the recovery dramatically.
How about meditation?
Yes, absolutely. Okay, so now I'm going to give you 2 caveats. There's 2 studies that were done. If you're familiar with Qigong is a form of traditional Chinese medicine. It's not like a meditation, but it's purposeful movement to attract the laws of the universe for your own specific gain, whether it's your heart, your liver, your head, or whatever it might be. So they did a story on that, research on that. And they showed that there was a moderate improvement. Now, back to meditation, the reason why meditation works so well, one of the nerves that gets injured dramatically is your vagus nerve. And so in a concussion, most people there's 2 parts to our nervous system. We have the parasympathetic and the sympathetic. So basically fight or flight, or you're relaxing. There's lots more little pieces to that, but those are the 2 big pieces. Most people in concussion, they're like, again, on the edge of the cliff, they're in fight or flight. They're wired. They have very little tolerance. They go from 0 to hangry. They get, belligerent, pain increases, right? So meditation raises function of the parasympathetic, the calming, relaxing part of your nervous system. It is dramatic, and some form of that. Patients say, well, I'm not going to do that because I'm not, into Chinese medicine. I'm not a yogi. Well, so my come back to them is like, do you pray to your creator, whoever you think that is? Oh yeah, I pray every day. Well, that's a form of meditation, right? And when whatever your prayer of the day is, like I have a ritual I go through every day. I have morning prayers and I have evening prayers that are the same, and then I have extra prayers on top of that. So that's like meditation. That is absolutely essential. People can start, it doesn't cost you anything to go pray. It doesn't cost you anything to just go in a room, turn off all the lights, turn off all the sound, and do nothing and listen to your own heartbeat. And having said that, there's a ton of stuff you can find out on YouTube, how to, do Tai Chi, how to do meditation, how to whatever, if you're not doing anything. But I encourage people to do that, even if you haven't had a concussion. That will just make your body and your longevity do so much better.
There's an epilepsy medicine, Lamictal, an old medication. Have you had any experience with that, and how have patients done with that?
I've not had any experience of that with concussions, but I have with patients that afebrile seizures, some epilepsy seizures, and I'm here to tell you it's a 50-50 crapshoot. Some patients it changes them. Some patients once in a while it works, and other patients it absolutely changes nothing.
And MCT oil. We talked about keto. MCT oil.
Okay, what's MCT oil?
Medium chain triglycerides.
Okay. So yes, that can be beneficial. Now there's a bunch of stories now that are coming out about using marijuana and marijuana derivatives. And what they're finding now is that the opioid receptors in the brain are more receptive to marijuana than they are to opioids. Like, when you exercise, you get the high of exercise. And so what ends up happening is those opioid receptors get flooded with the marijuana receptors, and then they become addicted to the marijuana stuff. And the brain shunts stuff, and it no longer helps the concussion.
So marijuana, good, or you would say marijuana is good or bad, or is it helpful a little bit, or stay away from it?
I personally would stay away from it for lots of reasons. Number one, we don't know the long-term sequelae. Number two, as a drugless practitioner, if I recommend a drug and they haven't classified that yet, I could jeopardize my license. So I follow things very closely that way. And then the other is just from an intellectual curiosity. It's like, okay, we have to resort to that because it's fast and quick and inexpensive. Surely there's got to be a better way we can evaluate this. So I have several different reasons that I prefer to not do it. I have patients that do it and they get some benefit from it. And as long as they keep me in the loop of what they're doing to their body while we're working on them, it's not a problem.
How about when you start exercising again to increase BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor? So when can we start that? When can the person start that who's had a concussion?
Okay, so this is the new emerging science of neuroplasticity, which is fancy doctor talk for nerves that fire together, wire together, right? So athletes do this all the time. They learn a new skill. Why was Peyton Manning so good as a quarterback? Because 3 hours before kickoff, he was out in shorts and a t-shirt with his wide receivers, and they were running pass patterns. And he knew when to throw the ball before the guy even made his cut and at what distance, because he did that a number of times over and over and over and over again, right? So he taught his nerves to fire and wire together. So back to when we started exercising, first thing is, okay, how much can you tolerate? Are you still too close to the edge of the cliff? Does it raise your heart rate too much? If it doesn't, then you can start doing things to raise your heart rate. Once you can raise your heart rate to 80% of max and you're not getting any symptoms, then you can start integrating head movement stuff in a sports specific thing, like obviously basketball or baseball or hockey or football. Excuse me. So to answer your question.
Yeah, before when I asked you about medium chain triglyceride oil, like a coconut oil.
Yes.
Coconut oil, because Mary who did that with her husband for Alzheimer's.
Okay, let's take the other aspect. Will it cause harm drinking that stuff? And the answer is absolutely not. So it's not going to cause harm. So now the question is it going to have some benefit? And the answer is I've seen some patients get benefit out of that, more in my non-concussed patients with arthritic challenges, in the aging population, and patients that are worried about the dementia Alzheimer's spectrum. They definitely get benefits out of that. No, I'm here to tell you, Doc, here's one thing I'm not doing. I love coffee, but I'm not putting butter in my coffee. Sorry, I can't do it.
You're not a Dave Asprey fan, I see.
No, I can't. I just can't do. I'll eat a stick of butter, but don't put it in my coffee.
What are some fears that patients have about concussion? I know from me as a parent, God forbid if my kid had a concussion, I would want to know, is he ever going to be the same?
Absolutely. So this will be about a year ago. We had a dad and a mom come in with their son, and he had 3 concussions in a short amount of time, about 6 months. And when we went through our report of all the stuff we found, all the stuff we were going to work on, and I said, "Do you have any questions for me?" And Dad looked at me because the kid wanted to know when he could play. Dad looked at me and said, when am I going to get my son back? I just want my son back. This person sitting beside us is not my son. Tell us what we have to do that. And so parents have that fear after okay, when can my kid play? And they realize that there's something wrong. And they're not getting better. And it's certainly not going to be life-threatening. So parents, like if you or I had a concussion, right? Our population age group is going to say, I don't want to be a burden on my family. It's like, what can I do? I don't want to be a burden on them the rest of my life. There's got to be something I can do that, I can help myself so that my family won't worry about me. And so these things play in people's minds. And so that's why I tell what school I'm from, and that is, these are fears. So what is fear? And that's false evidence that appears real, right? So they create these fears in their mind because of the unknown. And so I'm here to tell you, there are answers for concussions. You can get over a concussion, but there's a dirty secret. You want to know what the dirty secret is?
Sure.
Okay. So you ever heard of a guy named Zig Ziglar?
Sure.
This is a business model I took this from. I got to meet Zig Ziglar, and I learned a lot of business stuff from him way back when I was a young pup. So he wrote a book called See You at the Top. And his concept was real simple. So say it with me, Doc. What you conceive and believe, you will achieve. Right? So if you're down the rabbit hole of, oh, woe is me, I've got a headache, nobody can help me. It's like, okay, guess what? You're going to suffer a long time. But if you can conceive, listen, I know I can get better from this concussion. I don't know how, but I know there's somebody that can help me. And if you believe that, guess what? The creator of the universe will send the right person to you somehow, some way. And once you conceive and believe it, you'll achieve it. This may sound corny, but the stars will align for you. I don't know if you've ever experienced that with your patients. They say, they'll start crying and they say, "Doc, I've searched all over. Where have you been all my life?" And the answer is, you probably weren't ready to be here. Right. And so that, to me, that's the 2 biggest dirty secrets is, yes, there are answers for concussion. So if you got a bad knee, Doc, and you go to an orthopod and he says, "Oh, we need knee replacement surgery," and you say, "I'm going to get a second opinion," and you go to another orthopod and you get an opinion, what do you have? You have the same opinion twice. You don't have a second opinion, right? They're both going to say some form of knee surgery. It's like, okay, but maybe you should consider something else. So again, what you conceive and believe, you will achieve. And yes, someone has the answer out there. And Doc, I don't think it's an accident. People are listening to the show today. Some people are looking for answers, and I hope we gave them a few answers.
What percentage of people do you think do get better that have a concussion?
That is an awesome question, because when I ask patients to do things and change their lifestyle, some of them will do it until they're symptom-free, and then they bail on me. But then they'll come back a year later and say, "Doc, I'm starting to get back to headaches. Do you think I bailed too early on treatment?" I said, "Well, let's just find out where you're at, and see what you were like the last time we examined you and what you're like now, and have you regressed and have some of the concussion problems come back." So, people that are willing to commit to being better, and I know you've seen this with your patients. Some patients, they say, "I'm not sure I'm in the right place. You're a chiropractor. I'm not sure about chiropractors. Yeah, I know you were on staff with the Kansas City Chiefs," but it's like, So I asked them, I said, okay, listen, let's do this. I want you to write down everything that you are unwilling to change in order to get better. Tell me what you're never going to do. And because if I ask you to do that, that can make you better. You're telling me you're not going to do it. It's like you're in the wrong place.
Right. So, but you have any kind of statistic of the percentage of people?
Oh, yes. I would say if the patients that follow my instructions, even if it's not 100% to my recommendations, they're only 80%. I would say we have at least an 80 to 85% recovery rate.
Now, the instructions that we talked about in the last segment, was there any instructions that you tell them to do that we didn't cover? You know, between the supplements we talked about, hyperbaric oxygen, you know, and there's also eye exercises that neurooptometrists do to help with convergence, to help with accommodation. So there are special optometrists that deal in this type of work that help patients with concussions. And I've had them on my show at the Illinois College of Optometry, with, you know, Dr. Len Mesner, Dr. Deanne Fitzgerald. These are neurooptometrists who work with concussion patients on the vision side of it, because 50% of the brain is dedicated to vision, and there's a lot of vision symptoms. So is there anything that we didn't talk about that you do to help people get better that you should tell us now?
Okay. When we finish our workup on a patient, sometimes it takes us 4 hours to examine everything in a patient. We literally create a chart. It's a bullseye of all the testing we did. And there's 3 rings to the bullseye. There's red, yellow, and green. And obviously we want all the test results to be in the green area, which means they're at, you know, normal or optimal level. And so number one, it's very easy to visualize to the patient. Well, oh, neuroinflammation is high. My vestibular vision is off, and my vision is off, and then my balance is off, and then my neck is off. And so after we get all that data, then we develop a multi-dimensional approach, because, you know, when you sit down to have dinner, how do you know it's a good dinner? Well, you could go to a 5 Michelin restaurant and you could say, God, that was like $500 a pop, and it was not really good. And you could go to, you know, the Pancake House and have dinner, and it would be really good. And so what's the difference? And the answer is, part of the thing with your meal is the ambiance, you know, the music, the lighting, the wait staff, who you're with. Then there's it's not just the presentation of the food on the plate and the smell, right? It's a multi-sensorial experience. Well, our body works the same way. You don't work in one dimension. So sometimes, some days we have to, excuse me, do some traditional chiropractic work on their neck. Sometimes we have to do some osteopathy, cranial manipulation. Sometimes we have to do eye exercises. Sometimes, so we put together a multi-dimensional approach of all the things that need to be done. And then we do that systematically, so that I tell them, okay, listen, we got to do all these things on you, but should you do eye exercises? And the answer is, we got to get you away from the edge of the cliff first, right? So the fastest way to do that is usually getting neuroinflammation down, getting cortisol down, and getting oxygen up. So the first couple of weeks, we just may do some low-level laser therapy and some acupuncture for the cortisol levels, and some nutrients and some hyperbaric chamber, and not do any structure work, because again, we got to get them away from the edge of the cliff.
And in the last minute, again, if you could review, when can the kids go back and play?
Yeah, when they can go back and play, if they go from the resting heart rate and do all the physical things and get into a target heart range. Let's just say resting heart rate is 60. If they can get their heart rate up to 140, not have any symptoms, if they can then do, you know, sports specific stuff with head movement activities and don't get any symptoms, you know, that's probably a good indication that they'll be able to be fine to go back to play. But there's gradation of how they get there.
And in the last 30 seconds, I just want you to review what happens if they go back to.
Well, if they go back too early, they always risk that second impact syndrome. Fortunately, in older people, it's better, but they risk prolonging the problems, even if they don't have head contact. Remember, you don't have to hit your head to get a concussion.
And we got a couple of seconds left. What is one thing that you want the audience to remember about concussions?
Inch by inch, concussion recovery is a cinch. Yard by yard, it's really hard. Mile by mile, it takes a while. Just have to start making little changes to get you away from the edge of the cliff, get stuff working better. Excuse me.
I want to thank Dr. Ed Mladenoff for joining me today and sharing his expertise on concussion. His book, Doc, When Can My Kid Play? Dr. Mladenoff, if people want to buy the book, how can they do it? How can they find out more about you? How could they go to your clinic or your daughter's clinic in Arizona?
Amazon.com, just search the name of the book. We're going to give Melissa a link that they can find out directly to the book. They'll find out about our 1 hour free seminar that we're going to do online in about a month. And then if they want to become a patient, a link to our clinic.
Dr. Evan Mladenoff, I want to thank you for joining me on Open Your Eyes Radio with Dr. Kerry Gelb.
Your eyes and your vision are under attack, damaging blue light from the sun. Your phone, your computer, your tablet, even light bulbs and car headlights is constantly bombarding you. The good news is our eyes actually already have a line of defense to counter the effects of blue light. This defense is made up of 3 pigments called carotenoids. MacuHealth with Micromicelle, the only supplement with the exclusive patent on all 3 macular carotenoids and Micromicelle technology.
Fitting multifocal contact lenses presents a big opportunity to meet patient needs while growing your practice. Alcon is your partner not only with our innovative portfolio, but through e-learning. Learn to enhance your multifocal strategy today with the Alcon Experience Academy.